Welcome to the 19th season of the Nitwits, a weekly roundtable discussion on the Nittany Lions and the only show of its kind in the state. Our Nitwits panel features Neil Riddell of the Altoona Mirror and Mark Brennan of FightOnState.com. Between them, they've covered Penn State for 70 years. The Nitwits are hosted by WTAJ Sports Director Alex Colley, and each week we welcome a former Nittany Lion as our special guest analyst. The Nitwits are brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, an independent firm and a firm foundation for your financial future. By Coldwell Banker, no one will work harder to sell your home. By Courtesy Motor Sales of Altoona, where courtesy means a great deal. By Fiore True Value on 6th Avenue, Altoona, just ask rental, buy what you want, rent what you need. By The Allegro, where fine cuisine is a way of life. By Health South, your rehab choice. Health South Altoona, ask for us by name. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your dry cleaning, uniform, and mat rentals. By Reed and Solani Orthodontics, Dr. Reed and Solani provide orthodontics for children and adults. By W.S. Lee & Sons, your local food distributor specializing in distributing a full line of food service products to restaurants, schools, and institutions throughout central Pennsylvania. By EasyToUse.com, your Yellow Pages connection in print and online. By FightOnState.com, as close as you get to Penn State football without putting on a helmet. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Sunday.
Well, the Big Ten opener was not pretty for the Penn State football team, who started the conference season with a loss. Welcome into Nitwits. I'm your host, Jamie Baker, alongside Mark Brennan, Wally Richardson, and Jerry Fisher. Wanted to mention Neil Riddell is out tonight.
Yeah, Neil had a death in the family. His mom passed away. Our condolences go out to him and the family, and especially Mr. Riddell, Neil's dad. Big time fan of the show, always watches and has fun with it. So our hearts go out to everybody. And Jerry, thank you for sitting in today.
No problem. My pleasure to be here.
We appreciate you being here, and our thoughts and prayers are with Neil. Now, Penn State went into the big house with high hopes, but left on the wrong side of a 49-10 beating by Michigan. It was an ugly afternoon all around. So what was your general takeaway, I guess, from this one?
Yeah, you know, and looking at this, you can see where this Penn State team could be effective against teams that don't have great offensive and defensive lines. But Michigan clearly has veteran, deep, talented lines on both sides of the ball, and I think that was really the difference. I mean, we could nitpick about some calls, about some turnovers, that sort of thing, but at the end of the day, Michigan ran it, I think, was it 39 or 49 times for 300 and however many yards. When you do that, you're going to win a game, and on the other side of the ball, when your defensive line dominates the way they did against Penn State's offensive line, this is what happens.
I think one of the things that stands out to me the most is that this Penn State, I've never seen in my 30-some years of covering Penn State football or college football, the injuries mount up the way they have on one side of the ball, and not only on one side of the ball, in one position. And that really makes it difficult for a defense to try to get something to work.
Definitely. They had their hands full yesterday. We were outmanned in a lot of different ways, especially offensive and defensive line-wise, but that's something you learn with and go back to the drawing board and worry about controlling what you can control.
Yeah, I also think you have to give Harbaugh a lot of credit. I mean, listen, this is the way it is in big-time football. He knew that Penn State had issues, especially at linebacker. He knew he was going to have the advantage on the lines, and they exploited that. I mean, if you look at what Michigan did, all of those touchdowns, one of them was longer than 3 yards. They had the 40-yard run. Everything else was 2-yard run, 3-yard run, short pass, and they could dominate at time of possession. Michigan looked like the 4th-ranked team in the nation, and Penn State looked like a team that's not ready to play against the 4th-ranked team in the nation. James Franklin said something after the game, and while I'm sure you could attest to this because you've been in these games, that there's a huge difference between playing a ranked team and playing a top 5 team, a legit top 5 team.
Yes.
Anybody could be in the top, not anybody, but when you're from the 10 to 25, a lot of teams could fall into that range. This to me is a legit top 5 team, and Wally, you've been on both. You've been members
Yeah.
of the top 5 and play top 5, so you know.
Yeah, those guys were impressive. They imposed their will against us yesterday, and it wasn't anything fancy. It was just, this is what we're going to do. You have to stop us, and they were very successful doing it. And that's kind of, that's how it went down.
And the scary thing is, this is going to continue to occur because the opposing teams are going to recognize what Michigan did well. They're going to game plan for that, and Penn State's not. It's not going to go away. It's going to be something that's going to continue to happen throughout the course of this season.
The argument I would have with that, though, Jerry, is that I think there are 2 teams on Penn State's schedule that they just do not match up with. One of them's Michigan, one of them's Ohio State. Now, I'm not saying they're going to beat the rest of the teams. I mean, we obviously saw, on Saturday how human Michigan State can be at this point. But I think what Penn State has can be competitive, especially if they're somehow able to get that linebacker situation figured out a little bit. So I don't think a lot of these other teams on the schedule have the overall talent that these 2 top 5 teams do, which I think gives Penn State some hope, a little bit of hope looking forward.
And it'll be interesting to see what they do. James Franklin mentioned after the game that he's going to have to move some people around. Who do you move around? I mean, who's left to move around to help in that linebacking position?
Well, when you look at yesterday, I mean, you give up 49 points, you only score 10. What was worse for you, the offense or the defense?
I think there's no question it was the offense. I mean, Colorado scored 28 points on that team. The offense did not have the injury issues that the defense had. I mean, I gave the offense an F grade. I don't know how you can give it anything but. The defense, I gave a D because, yeah, they gave up a lot of points, but I do think you have to, take into account when you're down to your 5th, 6th string, linebackers. The one position to me after rewatching the game that I thought was kind of disappointing and surprised me was the receivers. They had opportunities to make some plays that would have kept Penn State in it relatively early. Now, some of them would have been very tough catches, but they didn't come through. That was supposed to be the strength of the offense, the receivers, and some of those kids didn't come through till the end of the game when it was way out of reach.
Offensive line, I think, is still a work in progress. I think they have some young talent that's going to be very good. Ryan Bates and Connor McGovern. When we see Michael Mennett and Will Fries down the line, you're going to see some improvement on the offensive line. But right now, it's still a work in progress, and I think that has got to continue to improve, or it's going to continue to be tough days for the offense.
Yeah, I think both offensive line-wise and defensive line-wise, when those guys go out to practice, they've just got to work on continuing to improve because it's not going to get any easier as we go through the season. People are going to get banged up, and there's going to be other opportunities for people to step in. So everybody gets better throughout the course of the year. So our guys have to make sure they're working to improve so that we can continue to compete and hopefully come out on the right side of the win column.
Well, just quickly, I wanted to ask, you look at the team, they're down 28-0, come up on a 4th down, and James Franklin kicks a field goal. He said afterwards that it was a bad decision. What were you thinking when that happened?
I was thinking it was a bad decision. I mean, especially calling timeout. I didn't understand it. I thought once they called timeout, they were going to go for it. Why would you waste the timeout? Not that it was going to come into play in that game anyway, but why would you waste the timeout when you were just going to kick a field goal anyway? Even if you took it delay of game, it was only going to move the ball back to the 7, and you're still going to get it. So you're basically not getting after it. And then I don't know, you guys could address this too, but early in the game, I thought they went for it on 4th down too early. You're only trailing 7 zip. It's 4th and 5, and yeah, I get that play might have popped. Had they, and we're seeing it right there, had they maybe gotten the block they needed. But it's some of these strategy things that, to me, I definitely question. I think James was questioning himself after the game a little bit.
I think that was obvious that he was questioning himself with the comments he made. And that has been one of the things that a lot of people have been talking about, some of the game day decisions made by Coach Franklin and his staff, and are they making the right decisions? But in the heat of the moment, again, I never played football, so it's easy for me to sit back and say something like that. But I still have a lot of faith in this coaching staff, even though it's easy to pick on something down the road.
And well, I'll throw it out to you. I mean, as a team, I get the part that if you're in a game early and you complete that 4th down, how much juice can that give you? So it's easy for me to be negative about it, but as somebody who's been out there, what's it like if you complete that play early in a game?
Well, I think it gives the team a lot of momentum, and I think one thing Coach might have decided to do that in the heat of the moment was to say, look, guys, we're here. we're not going anywhere. We're going to compete against these guys. Let's go out and get it done. So I think, if it works, it's
Right,
a
he's a
greater
genius.
decision to work.
Right.
If it doesn't, then you're not a real smart football coach. So you've got to do what you think is in the best interest of your team at that time. And hindsight is 20/20, and these guys are still learning, but we're getting better, and we just got to continue to improve. And we're in most cases a competitive football team. But as you can see, especially at the linebacker position, we've got some significant problems there right now, and we've got to figure out what we can do because, as Jerry said, these coaches are going to exploit our weaknesses, and we've got to figure out a way to cover them up.
We're going to talk about that
Go ahead.
actually after
Yeah.
the break. So we're going to take a quick break, but we've got plenty more to come, including taking a look at that injury situation when we get back.
The Nitwits are brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, an independent firm and a firm foundation for your financial future. By Coldwell Banker, no one will work harder to sell your home. By Courtesy Motor Sales of Altoona, where courtesy means a great deal. By Fiore True Value on 6th Avenue, Altoona, just ask rental, buy what you want, rent what you need.
I'm Bob White, former co-captain of the 1986 National Championship Nittany Lions, and you're watching the Nitwits.
We all did.
Welcome back. There's really no other way to put it. The Penn State football team took a beating yesterday. So what do they have to do to just put this loss behind them and move on from it?
That's the biggest thing. I mean, I said it going into the game. You're probably going to lose I think almost everybody who isn't a former player, and Joe Nastasi picked Penn State, but I think most people were picking Michigan to win the game. And my point all last week was, you may lose this game, but you can't let Michigan beat you twice. You can't let Michigan beat you 3 times. And the one thing that I saw in the post game, you know what? Guys came out, they faced the music. Trace McSorley continues to impress me, not just as a player, but as a team leader, as a quarterback who's going to come out and say, you know what, that's not Penn State football. He probably went overboard a little bit saying he was embarrassed by the way they play. But you know what? He was taking the heat. It's like, I didn't play well, we didn't play well, and I think that's the attitude you have to have. The guys came out, they faced the music, they talked to the media, they answered questions, and that to me is the first step of putting it behind you, and you just can't let Michigan beat you multiple times.
I agree with you, Mark. I don't think you can't let that happen or hang over your head and make it a hangover for you. Penn State needs to move on. You're going to see a lot of new young players. I mean, Cameron Brown got a lot of playing time in that game on Saturday. And I just think this team needs to move on the best they can, and it's up to the coaches to lead them. And the emotion that I saw, Wally, with this team, you look at what happened with Deshaun Hamilton after the Pitt game, and you look at Miles Sanders and some of the other players after this game, Trace McSorley, as Mark said, this team is very into their teammates in their season right now, and I like that.
Yeah, that's a definite positive development. And I know in my experiences, we got beat 49-10 yesterday. That's one of those things you can't worry about that. If we had lost 24-23, then that's going to stick with you for a while. But that game yesterday wasn't close. Put it behind you, move on, and just keep on forging ahead and getting better.
How hard is it to do that for kids of this age? Because this is a young football team.
They've got to rely on the coaches. That's the coaches. They've got to get them ready to play. We've got a tough Minnesota team coming into Beaver Stadium 3:30, and they've got to be ready to go. Time isn't waiting for them, and they've got to be ready to go.
You mentioned the youth of the team, and it just keeps getting younger because it's like that injury bug is just flying around and keeps biting them. With all these injuries, what do you even do, especially at that linebacker position? How do you even fix that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, James Franklin said after the game, they may have to think about doing some other things. And I asked him point blank, I mean, what else can you possibly do? And he said, maybe look at more position changes. I just don't know who else is out there who you're going to be able to play. A Marcus Allen. I'm not sure who else you would be able to play there. Maybe you play more nickel. Maybe you play more of the star packages that they've done well. You could address that.
Yeah, I think you might see them playing more with 5 defensive backs and a couple of linebackers and keeping the 4 down guys just to get more people that are playing in a more customary position. It might be a little different defensive-wise, but the responsibilities are going to be a lot the same, but you just have a different body type in there playing, and you have to do what you have to do.
This has to be a challenge for the coaching staff, because you don't expect anything like this when you're game planning in the off season, when you're game planning week by week. This has to be an amazing challenge, not only for James Franklin, but for all the assistant coaches, all the GAs, everybody involved in breaking this all down, trying to figure out something to do here, because this is unheard of.
Well, after the game, I talked to Manny Bowen, and I said, well, what's it like to be, one of the new leaders of the linebacker corps? This guy's a sophomore. And now he's in huddles, and he said, yeah, I have to be the vocal guy out there because I'm the one who's played a lot of football. And that's tough. Well, you played as a true freshman. You were a quarterback in as a true freshman, so you would know.
He was a star.
Well, I wouldn't. Thank you. I'll take it. It's tough. But I think the guys that are out there on the battlefield, going through the reps, those are the guys that you kind of rely on, because they're out there actually going through it, and they look to you for leadership. So you just have to kind of make sure that everybody take care of your responsibility, do your job, know what you're supposed to do, because you're going to have some opportunities, and the way things have gone, as you can see, you never know what's going to happen, and you're only a play away, and that's definitely been the case with our linebacking core this year.
How important is leadership from players, not necessarily from the coaches?
I think it's very important because it's the players' team. 20 years later, they're going to be the ones that out there sacrificing, going to the weight room, waking up for early morning workouts, practicing, hitting, and when you wake up, that's something they have to. They're going to remember that for the rest of their lives. The guys that are in the locker room. So you just want to make sure that you're not wasting any opportunities that you do have.
All right. Well, we've talked about some of the bad stuff from the Lions, but when we get back, we're going to turn things to the positives and maybe see what we took away from this game.
The Nitwits are brought to you by the Allegro, where fine cuisine is a way of life. By Health South, your rehab choice. Health South Altoona, ask for us by name. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your dry cleaning, uniform, and mat rentals. By Reed and Solani Orthodontics. Dr. Reed and Solani provide orthodontics for children and adults.
We now return to the Nitwits. A roundtable discussion of Penn State football.
Welcome back. Yesterday was not particularly fun for the Penn State players or fans, but one thing I took away, you mentioned it earlier, Mark, was that after these losses, the players seem to all bond together and say, we did this wrong, but we're going to get better. That's one positive I took from this game. I don't know about you guys, though.
Yeah, I mean, another thing I liked, and this is going to sound like faint praise, but if you compare it to the Michigan State game last year, where it looked like they basically just rolled over late in the game, even after some of the long runs, guys were getting down the field and making big hits. I mean, guys were still trying to get after it. As I mentioned, Michigan had one long TD. Everything else was grinding it out. So guys were in there at least physically attempting to get it done, especially defensively. And that's why I was reluctant to give the defense an F, because I thought, they were trying. They were trying to do the best they could. So for me, I think the fact that they played some hard-nosed football, even though they were getting whipped a little bit, I think that's a positive. And I would also say, Blake Gillikin, I know he outkicked his coverage, but if you're going to tell me someone's going to kick a 61-yard punt out of his end zone off of a short snap, this guy is something else. He really is something else, and he's really been a pleasant surprise.
I think I may have found somebody to help in the linebacker corps, a guy by the name of Joe Julius, number 99. Some of the hits that he has made, but you know what? That's a little bit of fire. That gets his teammates fired up. You saw when he came off the field of the Temple game, or the Kent State game, I think it was, and then after the hit he put on the guy in the Michigan game. Little things like that can help, Wally, can't they?
Yeah, I think guys want to see their teammates do well, and they all are going through a lot of the same things in preparation throughout the course of the week. So for guys to go out there and do some positive things, they want to reinforce that. And, even when some bad things happen, you got to pick them back up, because everybody's needed in order for the team to be successful. So you want to make sure you're supporting your team.
Even if it is a kicker.
Even if it is a kicker.
Well, we would be remiss if we didn't mention Saquon Barkley.
Absolutely,
I mean, that
right.
guy is amazing. What he was able to do, both catching the ball and running the ball without a lot of great blocking, he's, to me, just unbelievable. I mean, and he's a team player. Jerry and I were talking about it on the way down here. Everything he did on the field, the most impressive thing to me, Miles Sanders is sitting there basically in tears after fumbling. As the game ends, where do you see Saquon Barkley? With his arm around Miles Sanders, taking care of his teammate. To me, again, we're looking for things to, Saquon Barkley, the consummate team player and a great player.
This team seems to be tight, which I think is a good thing moving forward.
Well, it better be. I mean, it has to be. It has no
exactly.
choice.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we got to take one more commercial break, but then it's time to move on. We'll talk about what needs to be done for the Lions to bounce back against Minnesota.
The Nitwits are brought to you by W.S. Lee & Sons, your local food distributor specializing in distributing a full line of food service products to restaurants, schools, and institutions throughout central Pennsylvania. By EasyToUse.com, your Yellow Pages connection in print and online. By FightOnState.com, as close as you get to Penn State football without putting on a helmet. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Sunday.
So it is now time to forget about the Michigan loss and move on this week to Minnesota. The Lions haven't seen the Golden Gophers since 2013. How necessary is the win?
Well, I don't think it's a must win, but again, I think you can't let Michigan beat you twice, so it is important to bounce back. I mean, what we know about Minnesota is they're always going to come, and Jerry was mentioning it off air here, you're going to have a physical team, and I think that's a good test for Penn State. They're not going to be as physical as Michigan. They're not going to be as physical as Ohio State's going to be later, but they're going to punch you in the mouth a little bit, and you're going to have to come out and show some things, so that's going to be important for Penn State.
I think you're absolutely right. I think they have to weather the storm. Penn State has started incredibly slowly in almost every, just about every road game. Being home, I think they need to put together something good early to have some positive things going for them moving forward.
Yeah, I think one thing that we've done early in the season is kind of shot ourselves in the foot with some of the penalties that have been self-inflicted wounds. I'd like to see us continue to improve on that and make the other team beat us instead of us beating ourselves.
All right, so we have a different Nitwit of the Week for the third straight week. It is me. I have done well in this seat. I'm very proud of this.
As long as it wasn't Neil.
It wasn't. I did it. But so I get to make the first pick. I am going 23-21 Penn State in a close physical game. Jerry?
I will go 27-21 Penn State, and I think we've overlooked Tyler Davis. He has been phenomenal for Penn State as far as special teams go.
Penn State 27-24.
Wow.
Ooh,
I will go. I know we have to wrap up. I think Penn State's going to play better. They're going to rally around the Matt Limegrover and be ready to go. The former, Minnesota assistant coach. I'm going to pick a Penn State 30, Minnesota 25.
All right, so it should be a good one. Hopefully, Penn State can bounce back the way they did after that pit loss. And of course, we will all be at the game and be bringing you another episode of Nitwits after that one. So until then, have a great week. We'll see you back here, same place, same time, next week after the Minnesota game.
The Nitwits have been brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, an independent firm and a firm foundation for your financial future. By Coldwell Banker, no one will work harder to sell your home. By Courtesy Motor Sales of Altoona, where courtesy means a great deal. By Fiore True Value on 6th Avenue, Altoona, just ask rental, buy what you want, rent what you need. By The Allegro, where fine cuisine is a way of life. By Health South, your rehab choice. Health South Altoona, ask for us by name. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your dry cleaning, uniform, and mat rentals. By Reed and Selaney Orthodontics, Dr. Reed and Selaney provide orthodontics for children and adults. By W.S. Lee & Sons, your local food distributor specializing in distributing a full line of food service products to restaurants, schools, and institutions throughout central Pennsylvania. By EasyToUse.com, your Yellow Pages connection in print and online. By FightOnState.com, as close as you get to Penn State football without putting on a helmet. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Sunday. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.